Marvel Comics has always been known to display very human characters and stories, teaching lessons about responsibility, family, and justice. One essential part of the Marvel formula that makes it so relatable is its portrayal of historical events. From the struggles of World War II to the social justice era of the 2000s, Marvel has always played a pivotal role as an inspiration to those affected by these events. Let's take a look at Marvel through history. Many know Captain America as the star-spangled superhero from the Avengers who fights evil scientists and secret organizations, but his true comic book origins date back to 1940, when Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, a second-generation Jewish Austrian immigrant from the Lower East Side, created the character to battle anti-Semitism. And who better to fight than Hitler himself? The front cover of the first issue showed Captain America socking Adolf Hitler right in the jaw. Oddly enough, this sparked a lot of controversy, causing Americans who had been supporting what the Germans were doing to protest outside of Kirby and Simon's office building. This continued until the U.S. entered the war after the Pearl Harbor attacks. In 1941, the United States government enlisted the help of the comic book universe to be used as propaganda. Captain America was eventually seen in propaganda posters promoting the sale of war bonds and the production of victory gardens.
Series E defense bonds. Each one you buy is a bullet in the barrel of your best guy's gun.
Copies were even sent overseas to the soldiers as a means of boosting morale. The stories always ended with America winning, and the phrase, "The war is almost over," was seen many times on the pages. While the Cold War continued into the 60s, its influence became apparent as it started to seep into the plots and origin stories of many Marvel superheroes. The Fantastic Four issue number 1 followed four scientists being hit by cosmic rays while testing out an experimental space rocket. At first, one of the scientists, Ben Grimm, was hesitant to go through with the mission, but Susan Storm urged him otherwise, saying, quote, "We've got to take that chance, unless we want the commies to beat us." The origin story of the Incredible Hulk shows atomic scientist Bruce Banner exposed to his own gamma bomb, turning him into the Hulk. What's less remembered about his origin story is the cause of his experiment going wrong was due to the schemes of his boss, Igor, a secret Soviet spy. Even Spider-Man acquired his powers during a demonstration of atomic science, and his first official supervillain was also a Soviet spy named the Chameleon. All these stories were created by Stan Lee, who was directly voicing the American people's fears of the Soviets' technological superiority after being the first to send a man into space. In 1963, ironically before the US became directly involved in the war, Stan Lee created the Iron Man character, whose origin story was set in Vietnam. Tony Stark, the man behind the suit, was written as a genius billionaire tycoon who was fundamental to the military effort in Vietnam. The comic shows him fall into a trap and captured by Viet Cong and forced to build weapons for them. He instead uses the resources given by them to become Iron Man. Most of the Iron Man comics glorified the war through his actions, which is very interesting when you compare it to the 2008 movie adaptation of Iron Man, setting the war instead in Afghanistan and showing Tony Stark injured by his own weapons. Causing him to shut down the militaristic branch of his company, presenting a strong metaphor for how going to war became our downfall. The X-Men comics followed a group of superheroes with mutant powers living in a world where mutants are hated and persecuted by the public. In an interview for the 2000s X-Men movie, Stan Lee, the writer, talked about how he created the X-Men as an allegory for the civil rights movement. The X-Men did not fight against the people who hated them. The leader of the X-Men, Professor X, fought for freedom for mutant kind as a Dr. King-type character, while the X-Men's nemesis, Magneto, fought against the persecutors of his race, representative of Malcolm X. While the X-Men comics decided to portray the civil rights movement, Many comic book titles contributed to the civil rights movement by featuring black superheroes. The first of these being the Black Panther, who made his first appearance in a Fantastic Four issue. Adopting the name from the activist group, the Black Panthers, the Black Panthers showed a technologically advanced African society of Wakanda, an empowering genre that had never been seen before in comics. The next superhero to come from this was the Falcon, Captain America's new sidekick. He was the first black superhero to get his own comic series. Following the trend of African American superheroes later on was Luke Cage, modeled after icons of the blaxploitation era of TV and film, like Shaft and Superfly. Luke Cage was different from his predecessors in many ways. For one, his name didn't have the word black in it, which was very popular at the time. He operated on the streets of Times Square in Harlem, and he asked for payment for his work. After the Watergate-Nixon scandal shook the country in the 70s, Marvel decided to publish a Captain America series called Secret Empire. The storyline sees Captain America track down a criminal conspiracy to the White House. After defeating the organization responsible, he unmasks its leader to be President Nixon himself. After his defeat, this evil Nixon dramatically kills himself and leaves a body double to resign. In regular Captain America fashion, Cap reflects the thoughts of America at the time, showing a newfound distrust in the country. Because of this, Captain America went through a period of soul-searching, adopting the name Nomad, declaring that he was no longer associated with the rule of the government. After the September 11th terrorist attacks, Marvel was hesitant to write a comic that could be seen as capitalizing on the incident. After all, how could they explain how in a universe full of heroes and gods, no one could stop the incident from happening? However, it had to be addressed as most of the superheroes in the universe were stationed in New York. They decided to set the story in a Spider-Man comic referred to as the Black Issue for its black front cover. The comic begins with the line, "There are no words." Marvel made sure all the images of Ground Zero were completely accurate to the pictures. It was a difficult process for Marvel to go through, as their office was stationed in New York. The writers took creative liberty in having a few Marvel supervillains show up to help, drawing a controversial but iconic panel of Doctor Doom, the nemesis of the Fantastic Four, with tears in his eyes. To close the story, the writers show us the real heroes of the ordeal in a fitting closing shot. Many copies of the comic book were given to the workers at Ground Zero to help ease the emotions they were feeling about the situation. Such as the event itself, the comic would go on to be remembered forever. Marvel Comics went on to write more stories influenced by current events. Even some of the mainstream Marvel movies have plot lines that become very obvious where their inspiration came from. Some of the best stories are what Marvel has always written, stories that inspire the reader to be an active voice in these current times. This has been Marvel through history.